Hello and welcome to the One Question Leadership Podcast. This is Jill Bodensteiner, Director of Athletics at St. Joseph's University. As leaders, it's really important that we're clear regarding our goals and our vision and how those integrate into the greater university goals. We also need to collectively create a strategy and a culture that are going to help us reach our goals. This is an evolving exercise that requires an openness to continuous improvement. That's why I follow the One Question Leadership Podcast, because I love learning as much as I possibly can from my colleagues that helps me be the best that I can be. So my message for the day, keep learning, keep leading.
Greetings, this is Ty Brown and welcome to the One Question Leadership Podcast, where we highlight executive and organizational leadership. Be sure to follow us on Twitter and Instagram at 1Q Leadership. Our guest today is Marcy Lanoue. Marcy is the Senior Associate Director of Athletics, Chief Development Officer, and Senior Woman Administrator at University of San Diego. Greetings, Marcy. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Ty. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yes, ma'am. I'm happy that you're here. Now, you've been at University of San Diego for a little over 4 years. Previously, you worked in development at Southern Miss, external affairs and development at South Florida and University of Miami, and you've been in the industry for about 15 years. So you have a wealth of experience. Now, in college, you were a soccer student athlete for a year, and then you transferred to South Florida and decided not to play. But that's when your focus on working in college athletics, showed up, right? Your awareness of how the industry works. And believe you started working at that time. Talk to us a little bit about when you started focusing on college athletics.
Yeah, certainly. It was really an exciting time for me too. I really come from a family where I was the first individual in my family to pursue college. So my experience at Louisiana Lafayette as a soccer student athlete was awesome. I mean, going through the recruiting process was very unique. And I learned a lot from it. Really didn't know what to expect, but had a great experience there and made the tough decision to actually essentially go back home to Florida and enroll at the University of South Florida and continue my collegiate studies there, but, certainly didn't pursue continuing to play soccer there. But, it really opened my eyes because I really had this yearning and feeling of missing the daily structure and interactions of being in college athletics. And, I really didn't understand, as many of us probably that were former student athletes, that there was a whole business on the back end of really operating in an athletics department and serving student athletes and coaches and staff. So it wasn't a lot of science or intention with it, really, to be honest. I was a student at South Florida and just popped into my head one day and said, hey, I should call the athletics department and see if they would be willing to have a volunteer. And so I just cold called the athletic department at the time and spoke to the director of HR, Carrie Fisher, who's still a great friend to this day. And she invited me to come into the office and did an interview, which was probably pretty easy, actually. I remember being super nervous, but she said, hey, we'd love to have you. You'll answer phones and help with HR paperwork. And that's really how I got my start. So I probably averaged, 10 hours a week at that time. But what I learned quickly was I actually probably put in way more work than 10 hours. I ended up falling in love with the environment and really wanted to soak in all of the opportunity and experiences that were presented to me at the time. And then it just morphed into, as each year passed, I really had the chance to get close with multiple senior administrators, and they took me under their wing essentially and gave me more responsibilities, more exposure to multiple different units across the athletics department. And that's really where I felt the spark of my love, for college athletics, and really thought to myself, okay, I think this could be a career for me. And fun fact is Bill McGillis, who's our current AD here at the University of San Diego, was one of those senior administrators at South Florida, which, as you can imagine, he's been just a mentor, a champion for me, and couldn't be more thankful for him. And then also the senior women administrator at the time, Barbara Sparks McGlinchey, was super instrumental too in sparking my interest in pursuing a career in college athletics.
Now you've been in it. Well, I guess we said 15, but 15 years was just your full-time work. So if you conclude those 3 or 4 years as an undergrad, I mean, it's almost 20 years working in the industry. Looking at your career, it looks like there's a balance between running the external operations and focusing on development, right? And I imagine when you were doing the University of South Florida volunteering, there was something you saw in either fundraising or just bringing in revenue that probably sparked your interest. So I wonder about your comfort zone in terms of revenue generation and how you've developed those skills within that comfort zone over your career.
Yeah, no, totally. It was awesome because I feel like every opportunity that presented itself at that time not only got me out of my comfort zone, but it also really was a good fit for my natural skill set. And I had a lot of folks tell me at the time, peers and colleagues, just based off of my personality and whatnot, that, hey, you'd be great, on the external side of things. And with that, I really gained a lot of confidence, and my interest really elevated in pursuing, a role on the external side. And I was exposed to every single unit. So I even myself reflected on my different experiences and really started to understand where I probably would have had the best opportunity to show off my strengths, and make an impact on athletics department. So, like you said, I've had experience in the ticket office, marketing and promotions, events and development. The unique piece of my journey is, over 4.5 years ago, when Bill McGillis took the AD job here at the University of San Diego, he had 2 senior level roles open and available. And through my conversation with Bill, he was wanting those 2 roles to be a senior associate AD for external affairs and then a senior associate AD for development. And through our conversation at the beginning, he said, I think you can do either role, but I really want to recruit and identify someone who can complement our senior level staff here at USD. And if they end up having more experience on the development side, then I'll slot them into the development role. If they end up having more experience on the marketing and promotion side and revenue generation, I'll slide them into the external role, and then you'll take the development role. So at the time, I actually was really excited about that because it was almost like one of those things where you think it's also fate, like what's meant to be will be. And at the time, I really felt like, man, my jam is development. That's just where my comfort zone is. That's where I find that I'm most successful. But I also was super intrigued if the opportunity presented itself for external affairs, because I felt like that was going to be more so stretching me and pushing me and challenging me. And so that actually came to fruition. Bill identified Tyler Mariucci at the time, who was a senior level development officer at the University of Maryland. And actually, he just got named this week as the AD at Cal Baptist. So shout out to Tyler.
Yeah.
And so Tyler took the senior associate AD for development role, and I slid into the external affairs role. But I was certainly excited to learn from those around me. Definitely leaned on colleagues across the country who I have great mentors who have been in those roles before, and just took it day by day and really just tried to make an impact. Of course, my comfort level with Bill is second to none. So I was able to lean on him when I felt like maybe I didn't have the answers or I needed assistance. So it's been really good. And then Tyler actually departed our department a year and a half ago now for San Diego State University, so down the street. And at that time, Bill actually came back to me and said, okay, hey, do you want to slide back over into development? And I actually was really excited at that time to get back into development because I felt like that's really my niche. And it was a great experience overseeing our marketing, communications, and sponsorship affairs. But really, I think my sweet spot certainly is building relationships and inspiring those to invest in our program.
No, I don't know how this sounds, but it seems like there are a lot less bullet points when you're focused on development as opposed to focused on the internal, external operations. I mean, the
Definitely.
entire external operations of the department, right?
Yeah, I would say that's probably true. But also, there's the asterisk this year from a development standpoint, and frankly, all units. But with COVID and just the impact, and I think a lot of folks across the country, from a development perspective, whether they were a development officer, AD, or any role in revenue generation, there was this fear that we were going to have major challenges in inspiring folks to, invest in our programs this year. And certainly we across the board saw the dip in revenue, but one thing that I've been really excited about this last year is our donors have really stepped up. And I think a lot of that is due to our staff here. They've been relentless. We've had no fear in continuing to ask, our donors and alums to invest. And we've been super creative. So while I think this last year could have presented some challenges, I think we've overcome many of those too as well. And we're still pushing through, still want to make an impact and difference for our scholar athletes.
Right. Yeah. Excellent. Obviously, the COVID-19 pandemic is a huge challenge for everyone. But I wonder about the common challenges that you and your counterparts, the people that work in development around the country. What are some of the common challenges you guys face when working in development? Right, there has to be ups and downs of it, and I wonder about the creativity you guys use to solve those challenges when they arise.
I think there's a lot of challenges we can face in intercollegiate athletics, and that affect development officers and the perceived productivity, whether it's coaching transitions, the highs and lows of a season, whether it's wins, losses. This last year, coronavirus, political decisions made within a university. We've seen a lot of that this year too, as well, that can influence and certainly either make donors happy or maybe not as happy. And I think, as a development officer, you experience all of those things, because you're really the front line of the university in terms of the relationship with your external constituents. In terms of getting creative too, I think during times of challenges or uncertainty, it's really leaning on your staff, and everybody has ideas, and empowering them to either do their own research, talk to other colleagues across the country, generate new ideas amongst your staff, and then implementing it, right? Trying it, seeing if it works. That's one thing that I've admired about Bill's leadership. I feel like there's always room to bring ideas to the table and try it. And if you fail, no problem, you learn from it, but you can certainly feel confident that you can try something new again, and see what sticks.
So what's interesting in some of the things you said, here's a question that I have is, and I've had some experience. I worked part-time on campus down at Baylor and know people who work in development and people who are donors. And sometimes the donor is just really upset, right? You mentioned that they call and they want to voice their opinion. Where is the point when you say, okay, this might be something either for the AD to talk to, or we might need to bring campus in because this person's concerns are either pretty solid or they may be big concerns to them, and you might not necessarily know what direction to take them. How do you deal with that type of donor?
Great question. Great question. We actually, ironically, our university just announced, like many others, the requirement to be vaccinated for students on campus. And as you can imagine, there's certainly many families and parents and students for that matter, that feel a certain way about that, whether they're super supportive or they're just maybe not super excited about the fact that it's going to be required. So, and this is just an example, but we have here at the University of San Diego, a lot of our donors are also parents of scholar athletes. And so it's interesting to balance their displeasure when they're a donor and understanding who's best to handle that relationship and that communication. But I think, development officers probably usually this is a skill set of theirs, is they have typically probably a high emotional intelligence. And I think that's important because understanding the donor and who is best to really handle that relationship, whether it's the AD, the president's office, the president, yourself, or the chief development officer across campus, I think that's really what's key. And a lot of it too can be the personality type, right, of the individual that's best to handle the situation. Like, do we feel in a certain circumstance where we need someone who's a little more compassionate and patient? And who is that on our campus, or who has the established relationship? Or is it someone where it's just really super important for them to hear from the AD because of their role and prominence, or president for that matter? So I think it's hard to answer that, with a firm, okay, who's who. I think it's really based off of feel and just understanding. It's really relationships and who, in your best judgment, would be the most successful in that way.
Which is part of what you were hired for, right? It's part of the job is being able to discern how to handle various personalities, when to move it up the chain, when you can handle it yourself, etc.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Exactly.
So development, this is what I've always wondered about development, because if you look at college athletics, a lot of the people who make it to the athletics director chair, well, not a lot, but some of the people they come from development backgrounds, right? Revenue generation, or specifically development. And I've always wondered, and I'll probably ask a lot more people this question over the next year, but in terms of leadership, you were a fundraiser, so your focus may have been, maybe you were leading a couple other fundraisers. Maybe you were just a fundraiser who did well at your job. But I wonder, when you work in development, where do the opportunities for leading people exist? Because if you make it to the AD chair, you are going to have to lead people. And of course, you have that experience because you were over external. So you had to lead different people over different departments. But talk to us a little bit about leadership in development.
Yeah, that's a great question, Ty. I mean, I'll say a couple of things. Development, again, going back to what you shared and what I've shared, is you're dealing with people on a day-to-day basis. And not only are you dealing with your athletic department peers and colleagues, coaches, staff, university administrators across campus, but you're also dealing with the external base, alumni, donors, fans, community members. So actually, when you lay that out, there's a lot of diversity there in terms of people. And I think that's the beauty of development, right? So you're really forced to understand how to work with individuals, how to build relationships, how to listen, how to make the best decisions you possibly can to make an impact, and that's ultimately some of the fundamentals of leadership, right? And empowering others around you to make a difference. Those are just fundamental skill sets that you just naturally have as part of your responsibilities as a development officer that are just going to make you, that much better in the AD chair. I think a lot of development officers probably have some level of compassion because, again, you're working with people and you deal with challenges, ups and downs, the highs and lows. And I think that is certainly at least a pillar that I feel strongly about as a leader, that you have to have. And certainly we've seen that here within the last year and a half, right? With social justice and also COVID-19. I think compassion has had to play a big part in it. And I think the ADs who are navigating it the best, have that piece.
Yeah, what you said is important, I think. You have your hands in a whole lot on campus, so you have to understand how a whole lot of the campus works. If you're development, especially a chief development officer such as yourself in athletics, and then also what in athletics are people interested in order to know that, you have to have a healthy understanding of everything that's going on with the student athlete in athletics, and then just in general dealing with a bunch of different people from diverse backgrounds who potentially want to get involved with the university in terms of fundraising. That was an excellent answer, Marcy.
Thank you.
You work for Bill McGillis. Bill McGillis is well respected in the industry, but very well respected in the D1 ticker athletic director U area. Talk to us a little bit about what you've learned from him in your time at South Florida, and now that you work for him there at University of San Diego, and he is giving you responsibilities to develop you for whatever leadership position comes down the line. A little bit about what you've learned from working for a leader like Bill McGillis and what you will take with you as you continue on your career.
I love this question because it's my opportunity to brag about Bill for sure. And I've worked with him this long for a reason. And I've also worked for many others. He's just the leader I've worked with for the most amount of time. But, I think when I sort of evaluate what I've learned from Bill, it's been, I think I mentioned this earlier, is the no fear factor, and so I'd say I've learned to have no fear in many circumstances, the value of serving scholar athletes, that being the reason why we're here and what we're doing. And then also just the attention to detail within our industry. And what I mean by that is, I've learned how he's just studied our industry, which seems to be effortless on his part, but he spends a lot of time and carves out a lot of time outside of quote unquote office hours to know the intricacies of our business and to stay on top of whether it's trending or something that's coming down the pipeline that we have to be experts at, and there's been so many times I've been in the room where I just think he's the most intelligent person in the room. Right. And I'm just, sometimes I think to myself, gosh, am I ever going to get there? But I think what I've also embraced as I've gotten older is I also think, I have my own skill set and he's allowed me to flourish with what I bring to the table. Right. Because we also are very different in a lot of ways. And I think that's also what's worked with our professional relationship is I think he understands that I can complement him in some ways in terms of our leadership together. He doesn't settle for anything but great. And I think that's only going to better prepare me for an AD role at some point, and couldn't be more grateful for that.
Yeah, that's excellent. And you mentioned him being well versed on the industry, feeling like he's very intelligent and in the know. He's actually a major part of the reason why D1 Ticker exists. But that's a story for another day, Marcy. I really appreciate you joining us here on the One Question Leadership Podcast.
Thank you so much, Ty. Happy to be here and happy to serve our industry.
That was Marcy Lanoue. Marcy is the Senior Associate Director of Athletics, Chief Development Officer, and Senior Woman Administrator at University of San Diego. And of course, this is Ty Brown with One Question. And keep in mind, the role of a leader is to create and maintain an environment that people want to be a part of. And as always, be better tomorrow than you are today. This episode of the One Question Leadership Podcast is produced by Spades Media Group, solving problems using creative leadership.